Welcome to another edition of Hey Bobby with Senior VP of the Cleveland Guardians, Bob DiBiasio, with us on 93.5, 1590 WAKR. And Bobby, when we look at the Guardians and Major League Baseball, and you and I talked last week about the rule changes, stolen bases are way up. It's exciting to watch our team last year carry over to this year, and more teams are running first to third. They're stealing bases. It's fun baseball again. So with that being said, and talking about our franchise, I thought we could go back to the 1990s when we had the clubbers, right? We had Albert Bell and Tomey and Ramirez, all those guys in the lineup. But the guy that kind of stirred it up for us was a guy that was built on speed. And I thought maybe you could reflect a little bit on the importance of one Kenny Lofton to that lineup of that team in the 90s.
Well, today we need to talk about Kenny Lofton and his place in the Cooperstown in the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Whether or not you think Kenny Lofton is a Baseball Hall of Famer, it'll be interesting to see what the new Veterans Committee thinks of Kenny in that regard. But I do believe, and most of us who got the privilege to watch him play every day for many, many years at our ballpark, the discussion of whether or not he was a Hall of Fame player should have gone on longer than just one ballot. He did not get enough votes in the first ballot, so then you're taken off. And then you go into the Veterans Committee, modern era, that would vote on you. So that's a discussion that needs to be revisited, because he's certainly a dynamic, our most dynamic player, I think, in franchise history. When he came aboard in a trade from the Houston Astros, 66 steals his rookie year, which set a rookie record in Cleveland, rookie record in the American League, I believe. I'd have to double check that stat, but certainly a franchise record. And then for the next 4 more years, he led the league in steals that year, and then 4 straight years after that. So for 5 straight years, he was the American League stolen base champ, topping out at 75. He was right around that 66 to 75 stolen base mark every year for 5 years to set the table, for the RBI machines that were our ball club. So Omar batting second and Carlos third and Albert fourth, and whether Eddie was fifth or Manny and Jimmy, and I mean, just on and on. What a remarkable—
Pick your poison.
Yeah, what a Sandy Alomar batting 299 as the 9th hitter in that lineup in 97, his best year. So Kenny set the table. Gold Glove outfielder, stolen base king, dynamic player. Doesn't get much better than that.
And Bobby, the thing, you and I love to talk baseball, and we love the history. The one thing also that is away from the stat game is what he did to the pitchers getting on base that led to those RBIs, that led to Omar having terrific offense and those guys knocking him in. He caused havoc with those guys on the pitcher's mound.
Oh, he did. He saw a lot of pitches. Like most young guys, or I should say like most smaller guys who hit a home run now and then, sometimes his swing would get a little long because he liked trotting around the bases and doing what Manny and Jimmy and Albert and all those guys were doing. But he could change the face of a game. I mean, I thought the way John Hart, Dan O'Dowd pieced together that team, adding Kenny Lofton and Omar Vizquel to the team that of draft picks that we had, absolutely perfect. You acquire Sandy behind the plate and Carlos at second, then you go and acquire a dominant shortstop, the best fielding shortstop maybe in baseball history, one of the best defensive center fielders. Add him to our homegrown Manny, Jimmy, Albert, remarkable way that they pieced together a powerhouse clubs of the 90s. And I think Kenny, as I mentioned earlier, the word dynamic, I think that's the word that describes his style of play, his impact on the game. He'd be living large today because the success rate, I think it's at 81% is the success rate of stolen bases. You know, the new rules that are in place with the larger bases was done specifically to promote stolen bases and promote people trying to get, you know, from home to second and certainly first to third. So the success rate at 81%, I think that we have on this date today, there are double the number of stolen bases than there were a year ago. And the success rate, again, if it stays at 81% this year, would be the highest ever in Major League Baseball.
And if you look at it too, with the bases, you're getting basically 6 inches more.
Yeah.
3 on the front end and 3 on the back end, which also means first to third, you're getting 6 to 9 inches when you're turning second and heading to third. So, and I love it. And boy, Bobby, it plays well for our team, huh? When you look at that team speed from Jimenez and Straw and Quan and Rosario, those guys can go first to third and stealing the bases. Matter of fact, I was watching the game on Sunday with my son, and every time we got a guy on, I said, he's going to go. He's going to go. And it makes sense for the way this team is built. You mentioned the 90s teams, the way it was built. This team is built to take advantage of those rules.
Well, we were third in the Major League Baseball last year in stolen bases, second in the American League. So our guys in our baseball operations, Chris Cherney and the group were a year ahead of their time, knowing what was coming, and built the team on putting the bat on the ball and being aggressive on the base paths and making sure you pitch it and catch it. And that's a formula that should keep you in most every game. And if your bullpen is getting the job done, you're going to be hopefully where we were a year ago, and that's division champs and playing baseball in October.
Like it. Senior VP with the Cleveland Guardians, Bobby DiBiasio, with us with another edition of Hey Bobby. And now I'm going to hit the rewind button here and go back to this week, 1960, when the franchise traded Rocky Colavito to the Detroit Tigers for one Harvey Keene. Controversial trade in Cleveland, to say the least. And Bobby, I thought maybe you could reflect. I know you've had many conversations with our dear friend Rocky Colavito. Talk about this week, 1960.
Yeah, Easter Sunday, 1960, April 17th. Rocky Colavito and the general manager, Frank Trader Lane, having difficulty coming to contract terms. Harvey Keene in Detroit having difficulty with his general manager holding out for a contract. One of the more classic sports talk radio discussions, would you trade a home run champ for a batting champ? And that's exactly what this trade was all about. Frank Lane thought that Rocky struck out a little too much, but he led the league in home runs, was second in all of Major League Baseball with 42 home runs. Eddie Matthews led Major League Baseball in the National League with 46 home runs. You had Harvey Keene with a 353 batting average, leading the American League. And so two disgruntled general managers who thought they had disgruntled players is, in fact, Rocky's contract, if you could imagine, because Frank Lane thought that Rocky, since he struck out too much, was somewhat of a detriment to the offense, even though he came in second by 1 RBI from being the home run and RBI champ in 1959, when the Cleveland Indians battled with the White Sox till the very end of the season for the American League pennant. we were just coming into our own as a team. Herbie Score, Rookie of the Year in 55. Rocky coming in as, the fan favorite, the darling of Cleveland, as a home run hitter, an RBI guy. Frank Lane actually, Ray, put in his contract that he would give him $1,000 for every home run under 40, because he thought that would force him to be more of a contact hitter and less than strikeout guy. And Rocky's confused as could be. Have to tell you that it was obviously incredibly well received in Detroit. I believe it was Detroit Free Press. One of them had headlines of trading 142 hits for 42 home runs with an exclamation point. So Detroit was happy to have Rocky come over to play for the Tigers. Here in Cleveland, Harvey Keene lasted 1 year in a Cleveland uniform, not welcomed much at all because the fan favorite was traded. This is how the kind of guy Frank Lane was. And I asked Gary Bell and Mudcat Grant about this. Oddly, it's the last exhibition game of the season in Memphis, Tennessee on Easter Sunday. We open on Tuesday at home against the Tigers. Rocky goes 0 for 6 with 4 strikeouts. He actually rides the plane home with his Cleveland former teammates. He had just been told as he hit a fielder's choice, and he's standing on first base and gets pinch ran for. And as he's coming off the field near the dugout, the manager tells him, this is the last time you're wearing a Cleveland uniform. You've just been traded to the Detroit Tigers. Herbie Score was going to quit right then and there. His best friend, his roommate, it sent shockwaves through the dugout. And so, again, this is the kind of guy Frank Lane was. The story goes that, Rocky struck out 0 for 6, 4 strikeouts. And I don't know how many Gary had and Mudcat had in between the two of them, but that Frank Lane bought Gary Bell and Mudcat, back in the 60s, guys wore nice hats, fedoras. He bought them each a nice fedora hat for striking out Rocky on opening day. Yeah. And that's the kind of guy Frank Lane was.
How long did Frank Lane stay with our team?
He was GM. I don't know the actual numbers, but I don't think he was around an extensive period after that. But I think that's when Gabe Paul came in for his first go around with us. And you talked to Rocky, of course. Still, you could see the blood boil whenever you bring up Frank Lane's name in a conversation with Rocky. But Gary Bell and Mudcat and those guys, the Sam McDowells of the world, that you talk to them and they had nothing good to say about the guy.
Well, you can still see Rocky over in Little Italy in Cleveland with that statue there of our good friend Rocky Colavito. Going back to April of 1960, the Rocky Colavito trade. It's been another edition of Hey Bobby with Senior VP of the Cleveland Guardians, our good friend Bobby DiBiasio. Bobby, as always, thank you for the time, my friend, and we'll do it again next week.
Always fun, Ray. Take care, sir. Go Guardians.